coming to an agreement on what success looks like gets complicated. If you feel like there's all these other variables that you are out of your control, how do you really land on that? And so, yeah, I wish that there was a perfect way of doing it, but just because it's hard doesn't mean we're not going to do it. Like, it's not okay for us to just accept that and then perpetuate the problem. And you need to determine kind of who you're trying to be, right? As a company, we allowed for passion projects, just, that people were able to make or have more room in their week for that. And so that's what would create an issue for me, is if we had set this all up that way and now we became so driven by outcomes that, we allow that to dictate our culture.
Okay, welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Reid, somehow we usually have a guest scheduled on Mondays, but today we don't have a guest. It's just you and me. And because it's been so long, because you and I were supposed to have a separate time that we're recording like our independent episodes.
I didn't realize that, but then I was like, oh shit, do we have a topic? And you're like, you got some other things going on.
Yeah. So we haven't, and so we haven't even been, Trevor's kept us so busy with the guests, we haven't even been on our, usually we have this running list of topics. Yeah. And it's funny because some of them are now, for me, deprecating that it's been, as we were trying to just game plan ahead of this, I was like, do I bring this up? And I was like, oh, it's been 3-4 months since I've read that book or whatever. Yeah. So I don't know if I should. Anyways, so we ended up landing on talking about value statements, and I'm getting into wanting to tie that to hours you work. So I don't know what you would call this topic, or do we name the title afterwards?
Yeah, title TBD is what we call this. So yeah, I'm interested on the hours thing because, you and I had that conversation, not day one, and I don't know if it's going to be the same conversation.
It's going to be similar,
but yeah, we had different perspective on that, so that should be fun or entertaining. And then maybe I should start, since you said value statements, by just what the hell are we talking about, defining that. But I'll start if that's okay. But I have been feeling for the last year at least, but in particular, probably in the last year, that we are seeing more and more job recs coming in, and more so on the support side of things. So when I say support, not the kind of direct day-to-day, blocking and tackling. So these are things that are, usually kind of ancillary or augmented support. And then the other thing that we're seeing a lot of is strategic, air quotes, strategic hires, and those could be more specialized or senior positions that we think, the business needs. But what I don't see when these job recs come through is what our expectations should be, specifically from a business outcome, and be even more direct, like financially. And so what started to get to me, I guess, is that these all add up. So if we're not clear whether you're asking for I'm not picking and not even saying that Trevor really is pushing, if you're listening, Trevor, for a marketing coordinator, but that's an easy one just to use. It's like, okay, so if we hire this marketing coordinator, what does the business get back as a result? And usually with things, and that's kind of the more frontline support, but it's like, well, this person will have more time, or that person can get to more. And it's like, okay, so then what does that mean? Well, more strategic, deep thinking. What does that mean? Well, and then there's usually a pause, and maybe they don't get past that. It's like, well, I'll be able to put more effort into lead gen strategy. What does that mean? Well, our lead gen strategy will be better. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Well, more leads. And what does that mean? Well, more customers. And what does that mean? Mm-hmm. More revenue. And what does that mean? Well, more revenue. It's like with profit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're there. Mm-hmm. So we know all the way back where we started. Why are we hiring a more marketing coordinator? Yeah. Is to drive more revenue.
More profit.
Yeah, and more profit, ultimately. Okay, so now we're there. By how much? And it's like, well, I don't know, mm-hmm. And that's the part that, there's a lot in between, but whether you're looking at C-suite, because I was just sharing with you offline, I'll say I had some fun, but I was dead serious with CFO we just brought on. But what she thought her value statement should be. And so whether it's a coordinator or seat position, it's like, why shouldn't you put them through that exercise or yourself through that so that you're clear on what success looks like? And then ultimately, when you come back and hold that accountable. So it's like, all right, I'm the coordinator. If you're telling me that it's going to be revenue and ultimately that's going to turn into more profit, when do we take a look at this? 6 months and 12 months and 3 months? Mm-hmm. Because if that's not clear, what are they really here to do? By how much? Like, what do we expect the delta or difference to be in a good way? And then when? Then what could happen and is happening at Digible is we have more and more of these support and strategic hires at the company that it's not clear what their contribution is ultimately. And it's not easy. But if you don't do that, don't you end up in potentially a worse position, which is you've inflated your payroll, driven down your EBITDA, and you don't even know where or how to unpack that and really kind of scrutinize it, hold it accountable, and make whatever changes, optimize what you need to with the business. And so, this year, I've put that expectation at minimum on C-suite and our directors, but is to be clear on what their value statements are. And the goal or the idea is that will, trickle across, or I guess be rolled out across the rest of the company. And it can be a little, I guess, unnerving, because a lot of people haven't been through that. I mean, hell, I hadn't been through that, at the positions I held before Digible. But at the same time, it's like, don't we want this? Like, wouldn't an employee want that? So that marketing coordinator gets brought on and they're put through this process, and it's like, oh, I'm here to drive profit from the revenue, from more leads, from more quality leads, from, whatever work I'm doing. And I'm also freeing up, some of the, the people in my department to help contribute to that. Don't you want to be able to celebrate or know 6-12 months later what your contribution was to the business? Because if not, I feel like I would have more, anxiety if it's like, I don't really know why I am here, like what I am doing to move the business along. But it really does get hard. I mean, I'm trying to simplify this, but when you look at especially like back office positions, and again, those support positions or positions like HR. So I went through this with our employee experience director, and it's like she's serving the company in multiple ways, and the whole company. It's not a sales position. That's for sure. And so really kind of, I guess, confronting some of that fractional value gets complicated. And then, coming to an agreement on what success looks like gets complicated. If you feel like there's all these other variables that you are out of your control, how do you really land on that? And so, I wish that there was a perfect way of doing it, but I just told her, as I told Ashley, CFO, and I would tell that coordinator, just because it's hard doesn't mean we're not going to do it. Like, it's not okay for us to just accept that and then perpetuate the problem where we have more and more people that we're hiring as we grow as a company. We're around 125 people, and a third of them, we're not really clear on whether they're actually driving value to the business or not.
Yeah.
So that's overarching summary of where I'm at, and what value statements mean here, at least at Digible.
Yeah, I was going to end it like a definition. Value statements. That's the thing. So let me back up for a second, meaning, because you and I think we've talked about it in this podcast before, but when we were at the Post, you had to go through zero-based budgeting. And to me, this in a way leads to that, or maybe it's related at least, right? Where it's like, and the example you always gave me about the Post with the zero-based budgeting is that you guys would be questioning coffee cups.
The president of a multi-billion-dollar company was questioning coffee cups.
Yeah. So what is do you have updated thinking on that now? Meaning like
whether I subscribe to zero-based budgeting?
Yeah. So just for those that aren't aware, but basically you look at every line item.
It's a bottoms up.
And you have to
the coffee cup.
Yeah. And you have to say basically like, let's pretend we don't have a P&L. Like we can't look at last year. So our marketers that listen would be familiar. They often take last year's budget and then use that for this year as a starting point. Forget that, start over and say, now what do we need? Like from the ground up to build to, get the outcome we want. So now you guys would then in the past be like, well, we buy coffee cups, and be like, but why though? Right. So yeah, do you have updated thoughts about the zero-based budget?
I suppose, I mean, not maybe overly specific to zero-based budgeting, but the concept of it. So I think there's a lot of value and power, and it definitely made me think differently than I had prior to going through that. But I also did feel like there was a lot of, I'll say, waste, meaning ironically, the time and energy put into talking about coffee cups. So I think that it's too simple and not a good approach to just say we accept, an arbitrary number, like a percentage devoted to culture.
Yeah.
Because that's what I would have argued, is that you take away the coffee cups, we save, $300 for the year.
Right.
But the
payroll in this room is 10,000.
Right. That and the impact to culture.
Yeah.
It's like, so us having to update or explain, to somebody that just started why we don't have coffee cups.
Yeah.
Is not great for culture. So how I'd meet in the middle on that is I would say that there is a certain amount that you do need to invest, and you need to do your homework there, and you need to determine kind of who you're trying to be, right, as a company, like who you're trying to compete with, and do your due diligence. And then I feel like back into because you and I have also had on this podcast some discussions about, the struggles we've had along the way about where do we begin and end.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how much does Digible feel like it should be investing? And I would say this is more about talent acquisition and retention. Like, instead of just culture at large.
You're saying we're not going to get that higher because we don't have coffee cups?
I would say if there's too many examples, not just one, of that zero-based, like those outcomes of like, we don't have coffee cups. We no longer have filtered water.
Yeah.
Like
we haven't had hot water in
tap
3 years.
Yeah, that's true. That just changed. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
I got a text from Lisa, I think, over the weekend. She was so happy about it. But anyways, yeah, I think you have to confront that and then try to determine again within maybe your peer set or what you're aiming for. But as far as I'm going to, again, avoid culture and just say talent acquisition and retention. And that is driven by culture, and there's a lot of things that drive culture, but skimping on coffee cups certainly, would be one of them. So I'm sorry, I'm not being more direct, but you and I both read the book, The Lazy CEO. And one of the things that I really appreciated about that book is we both searched for context, is it gave some idea of like, if you're on the higher end of training or the lower end of training. It's like, so if your revenue's here, you might want to spend 2 to 5% on training. And so that, I think, is a better way of approaching it than necessarily line by line, 10,000 lines with, $1 billion company talking about coffee cups. It's like, let's try and get to some ranges here that we think makes sense, and we'll make sure we still get good people and keep it on.
One of the reasons I was bringing it up is because if you tie the concept of zero-based budgeting to roles, then and also like we just talked about this morning for our scorecard for the executive team, to have a behavior-based weekly metrics, right? To say what that lead to the right outcome. Then I feel like it's a system that would work well together, because it'd be like, sure, everybody has X budget for the year, but every year you're going to be expected to defend this budget to say, like, here are the outcomes we want, here are the behaviors we're doing, and here are the positions responsible for those behaviors. Because then it should all flow through. And then that way you wouldn't have to challenge every individual position, strategic hire that's getting created, but it's more of, because I think one of the fears we've had is if we open up this strategic position, then it won't go away. It's kind of, you and I were just talking at lunch about, there's a process to create laws, but it's much harder to undo a law once it's made, right? So same thing it has felt in the past with Digible. It's like, well, we have this position. Undoing that position has been very challenging. And so if it's more of the known, it's almost like Elon Musk, where it's like, yeah, this might get ripped out again, right? Then culturally it wouldn't be as bad to like let some of that stuff through. But right now it almost feels like it becomes canon or something afterwards, right? Therefore, like letting something through becomes precedent, and then other people point to it, and then it's just a snowball.
100%. And we are trying to correct that problem here at Digible as far as having strategic hires, or to me, these, I don't know if this is the right way, but the frontline support, or augmenting, kind of our support with the front lines, that it will be less difficult to repeal or pull that back. And it'll be more, I don't know, say black and white, but, clear that this is the timeline. This was the expectation, and it's part of running a business is you're not always going to be right. In fact, you should probably assume you're usually going to be wrong. And that's the better way to kind of go into it. Meaning when you are kind of putting yourself out there with different business cases, whether it's payroll or projects or whatever, assume that you're going to be wrong.
So this actually reminds me, tell me if this would be if this would be a fair comparison, but years ago, you and I latched on because we were talking with Paul, the CEO of Ninja Cat. He was saying, hey, we're stopping all new feature development because it's Operation Bulletproof right now. We're going to make this platform bulletproof. That's what it feels like where I guess what we're entering into with Digible, where it's like for every position, it's almost like in the past, you're like, we just have to hire these things to keep the train moving. And now it's like, well, hang on, anything that's not specifically like accounted for with like client based, we're being very discriminating, or just we're looking at it very closely versus for now, because we want to make sure that we feel bulletproof for every position that it needs to exist. But with that, it comes in a way, it's like you're slowing down, similar to Ninja Cat with Bulletproof, like you're slowing down, or there could be opportunity cost. So yeah, I just was wondering if you have thoughts against the opportunity cost by halting things in this way to make sure that each of these positions have value statements.
Well, that is assuming that we're halting or slowing down. So I when I say challenge, I couldn't tell you that you're wrong, or that assumption's wrong or right. But I don't feel that when I look at our growth, our decision process might be, this minute it is not, I can tell you, but that it is intended to be a little bit, there are more, let's just say red tape, that there's a little bit more process to it, more scrutiny to it. But for me, let me just entertain and say, yes, it is slowing us down. It is halting things. I won't know, and I couldn't tell you when, but whether, that is the hard part with some of those types of decisions. And I remember when you and I think we were together, we were talking to Aaron, our CTO, about this, but he said, you have, because we were sharing some of our takeaways from No Rules, Pete Hastings' book from Netflix, about that culture versus Slack. And he was like, Slack is, call it highly preventative, so there's way more red tape and therefore it slows things down. But they run into less issues down the road because of that, because they're so prescriptive about the way that they go about, operating. And then you had Netflix, which was like way faster, I guess from public view, and internally, and how they made decisions and, what they would, how quickly they could go to market with something or innovate. But they also had some really painful lessons. And so is it better to try and strike the balance, or is it better to really adopt more of, one or the other? And I wish I could say right now where we really skew, but I feel like we're probably a little bit more towards the Netflix, and I'm trying to, at least on my side of things, like pull that back a little bit.
It's interesting. There's a recent interview with Zuckerberg where he actually brought up a similar example where he was comparing Meta to Apple. And he's like, when you look at Meta, he's like, we will release things fast and often. It's kind of the whole different version of his go fast and break things, because they want feedback and to be able to like pivot and whatever. But he's like, Apple's not that way. Apple waits until they believe it's basically perfect to release it. And he's like, so you get, obviously you have like Meta Quest out there years ahead of Apple's Vision Pro. And he's like, it's just, you got to figure out which company you want to be. And the interviewers were asking him like, well, don't you think you take a reputational hit to do something like that, meaning move fast and get things out there? And he's like, well, not if you do it the right way. He doesn't think you get the reputational hit. He's like, or he just wouldn't end up agreeing. I think there's something to it. There was a separate interview I heard with one of the Google founders, and he was saying a similar thing about Gemini. He was like, NLG. He said Google was the one that originally published the paper on how to build these NLG models, and then they were too afraid to move forward because of the reputational risk of like getting something wrong. He's like, AI hallucinates, and we weren't willing to do it. Then you have OpenAI, a startup, take the paper and build the damn thing, and then they're running away with it, right? And he was like, we kind of got it wrong.
So do you believe, if I can ask you, that it was actually reputational risk and not innovator's dilemma? Because a lot of have now forecasted this as the beginning of the end, which is kind of silly to me, for Google, at least in their, advertising empire.
Yeah.
So do you think that it was that they were more worried about reputational risk or more worried about their financials?
Well, he said it was reputational risk. That I can't help but wonder if there's not some. Yeah. I mean, if I were them, I could understand if you were worried a little bit about the financial aspect of disrupting the world's greatest business model.
Yeah, right? That's what I'm saying. And that's what everybody's trying to understand, right? With OpenAI is, what does their business model look like? I mean, they've already tipped their hand, I guess, as far as subscriptions. Is it going to be able to?
They're raising like another $230 billion or something now, because it's like, sure, they have some business model now, but it's not figured out yet.
Yeah.
Right. And who knows? And it's funny, the Zuckerberg interview, going back to that for a minute, he said that he never meant for Facebook, at least in the early days, to become a business. He said when he moved out to California, he was like, oh, this is just a project I'm working on, but eventually I'll get a real job. Mm-hmm. And someone was like, we should add advertising. He's like, but why though? And then eventually they did. And then he was like, and then it became a business. But before that, he just thought it was going to be a project, and he thought it was going to move on to like something else. Like he just thought it was a way to get out here and cut his teeth. Mm-hmm. And so it's just interesting how it's like, they don't have it all figured out, right? Like Zuck didn't think it would actually become a company. And now it's one of the most impactful companies on the planet, right? And he can't like unwind it. And so going back to the value-based statements though. I'm wondering like how you think we should balance having that clear statement. And at what point would you say like, man, I really tried to push this rock up the hill, but we're just not getting all those statements in. And we also have to move on with like regular state of business. Because the reason I'm saying opportunity cost, or why I was asking that question, is because it's kind of like the first time you learn cursive. And it's like your teacher says you can only write in cursive. You are just slower. Now, if you learned how to write cursive properly, sure, you would be faster. But you're just slower to start. And I feel like that's what it is with any of our leaders that are being challenged to write these value statements. It's all like they're learning cursive. And at some point, they're shooting up slow and they got to get the paper out the door.
Well, I think that actually it's not if we do this right, I have less worry about it slowing us down up front and more concern about the ramifications down the road. And I'll explain. So once they start exercising and start writing cursive, I don't think this is rocket science. I know there'll be some, coaching and some maybe tougher positions to vet or go through. But I think it's more the accountability and the possibility that half of these hires won't be contributing. And do we have the discipline, to make those changes when they come? So I don't see speed as much being, the potential issue here. It's more, will we hold them accountable? And are we doing it, the right time frame? Because some of these positions, as we were talking during lunch, about administrations, maybe that's comparable or not to C-suite, but certainly Ben Horowitz and I forget who the other guy was, the podcast that you turned me on to, but they talked about this. They were like, when you get it wrong, a C-suite, you won't know, or you might know soon, but just be prepared for a year and a half, 2 years, like that's the kind of timeline that you're looking at. And that's why many people give C-suite more time, is because they know how damaging it could be if you get it wrong. So they're more likely to try and work with them to get it right. They weren't necessarily saying that they agreed with that, but they were like, that's what's typical. versus somebody that, is, I'll just say, a little bit lower level support. Is that something that you'd be more inclined to move on 6 months, 12 months following the hire versus waiting 2 years?
And what's interesting about that, so like, let's say, we get support position 1 and this imaginary position. And then this imaginary position, you're like, okay, great, we'll see the ROI in 6 months or whatever. That's what the leader is saying. Many times I could imagine a scenario where we forget to even come back and look at support position number 1. So you have a sort of like drag from like loose change or whatever, the couch cushions. And you're like, it's fine. I just started rewatching Silicon Valley, and I'm just thinking about some of those folks in that show. But I can see how that happens.
I think we want to see that. Yeah,
it's very good.
Yeah.
And I was surprised it's like 10 years old.
It was very good for 3 seasons, maybe 4. Yeah. But forget which of the main characters once he dipped out.
Oh, it's starts with an E, like
Erlich.
Erlich.
Yeah. That was a blow.
Exactly. That's what I thought. I was like, that's when it felt like it took a turn. But he's still in it where I'm watching right now. So it's so fun.
Yeah, he's great. Well, that then requires, so that doesn't happen with the loose change, is that you have a cadence. It's like there's certain audits, I'll say, that need to happen in a business, not just financial, but personnel. And we're getting better at this. I think you'd agree, from where we were a few years ago with the right people, right seats. Mm-hmm. We just had a review with our experienced director and like what this monthly process is going to be. So there's a lot more energy, a lot more, not just energy, but systemization that we're putting behind it. And I think that hopefully would include then value statements. And it's like, this is just one piece of it.
So,
by clockwork.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think it's almost like you have to teach the organization this new skill, and then it has to get in the habit of using that new skill, and you can't let it atrophy right too soon and just like conveniently go away. So it's that's what I'm saying. It's a rock up a hill, because
it totally is. So I'm not trying to, I don't think this is going to be easy.
Right. And then, over time, it's, there's a couple other points I actually want to get to. So I got opportunity cost, zero-based budgeting. I do. Let me just take it straight to the value statement now. How much do we care that the value statement is accomplished in the 32 hours? Because that's
right.
That's where
you're going to get to this. Yeah.
So I have more I want to come back to, but I didn't want to lose that before we botch on time. So here's my thing, just so the audience knows, like, we don't work Fridays. And because of that, they're on this 4-day, 8-hour week. And one of the things we struggled with is at times we have certain people that can do, Reid and I use sports analogies a lot, but let's say that you have to move. Well, I'll just stick with the 40-yard dash since that's what you and I have. It's like, hey, we expect you to be able to handle X amount of work so you can run the 40 yards in 4.2 seconds. But then you have some people that are like, I know I have 4.2 seconds to run this 40-yard dash, but it takes me 6 seconds. And I don't mind staying after practice to finish my dash, right? And we've struggled with that because sometimes people won't complain about it, but then if they're actually surveyed and say, do you work after hours? They'll say yes. And so then it makes it seem bad, but maybe they're still a happy employee, generally speaking. So the question is, if someone can't run the 40 yards in the amount of time allotted, do you kick them off the team if they're willing to do the extra practice or not? And that's where we struggled. We're just, I guess, aligning on like the first principle there. So that's where I want to go on the value statement. If it was like, let's keep it easy with the salesperson. Let's say we had sales and it was like, you got to have 100 calls a week and they can't get it done in 4 days, but they're willing to do the calls on the Friday to get there. At some point, do we tell them they can't be here, or do we really just care about the outcome?
Well, I thought you were going the opposite, and I think we're going to get to the opposite side of that. If they could do 100 calls in one day.
Right? Yeah, that eventually happens, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's the whole, like, average person.
Yeah.
The average, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm okay with the person putting in the extra day or maybe even 2 to get there if they're an outlier, if they're an exception. But we wouldn't want to make the exception the rule, which is what we were really looking for, is have we pushed too far, and now On average, people are, I guess the majority of folks are having to spend time on Friday to get to those outcomes that we're looking for, value statements. But if there is the Rudy that's like, hey, this is my choice, right? I know that, most of my peers here can get this done in 32 hours, but for me, it takes 38. But I love the company and I think I can eventually get there, then yeah, I could live with that. But if we, proportionally, I guess, have like, more than 10% of the department are Rudies, then yeah, that might, trigger some changes.
And what has you feeling? I know that you're just picking like numbers right now, but what has you feeling? Why would you care? I guess if it becomes the norm. Yeah, let's stop at that.
Well, because I feel there's some level of this is going to sound heavy, but hypocrisy, I guess, or just to be going to market and evangelizing, our belief in work-life integration, balance for integration, and using that, frankly, as a recruiting strategy and retention. It's like, this is a philosophy. We believe that it wasn't ever about how much you could get done in what period of time. Like that was never why we started that 4-day work week. It was because we wanted to make sure that we allowed for, you had mentioned passion projects, DAX, that people were able to make or have more room in their week for that. And so that's what would create an issue for me, is if we had set this all up that way and now we became so driven by outcomes that, we allow that to dictate our culture.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Let's say that we'll use account load now, so it's easy. But let's just say that like our top folks can handle 150 accounts during their time, right? And still have some left over for passion projects. But then we have some other people that are handling half that, 75 accounts. And so they have to work almost twice as much to hit the 150 accounts. Now, maybe they're willing to do that because they just love it, right? But at some point, if we start saying, hey, that's too many of you can't, and we have these other top performers, then it almost, I guess what we'd have to be concerned about is the elitism aspect of it, of like, well, because you can't do that, you just can't be here. And so you let go of someone that loves their job, even though it takes them twice as long, right? But we as a company, generally speaking, have always wanted to continue bettering ourselves. So that whole like demarcation point used to be 100, and then it was like 110, then 120. And at some point you find these really elite people that can handle the 150, but it does mean at some point we have to be okay with letting some of the other people fall off, where it's like, I'm sorry, our goalpost is now over here. But it is a little bit of there's that elite aspect to it, which I'm saying I could get on board with. It's more of those ramifications that you're talking about, because that's where some of this starts to struggle for me, where if someone's willing to get the outcome and they're happy doing it, then trying to say, well, I understand you're happy doing it, but you just can't be here, that's tough for me. But if it's more of like hey, look, now they're stressing out, right? They're bloodshot eyes all the time and whatever. It's like, look, man, you're just not happy anymore, because like this is the new mark and you just can't, you're not genetically gifted enough or whatever to get to do it. That's okay. We'll help you find something else. That's a little different. It's when someone's willing to, that it's harder for me. And that's where the time tracking I've struggled with in the past comes in.
Totally. Yeah, I think it does boil down to the goals of the company. And so if the goal of the company is maybe marginal, but is the best word here, but is modest growth, then perhaps you're more comfortable with more of those scenarios. But if the goals of the business is aggressive growth, and it all is quantifiable, right? It's like, we're trying to get to 20% next year. What's needed in order for us to get there? And usually that comes attached with, and how profitable are we going to be? Because we're not a nonprofit. We are a for-profit business. And we've used our profits over these last couple of years, or 3 years now, which is exciting to say, to reinvest back in the business in different ways. And if, you're no longer able to generate and grow those profits, then that just means that there's less that you'll be able to experiment, innovate, and invest back in it. So there are consequences, I think, to not kind of drawing a line and saying, again, this is the level of growth and profitability that we're expecting. Therefore, if you're not able to run the 40 in this time anymore, as much as you love to be here and are willing to work the extra hours to get there, there is a drag if you carry too many of those scenarios.
Yeah. So there's a couple of like maybe what ifs. I'm not sure if that's the right thing to call it that I want to run through. So yeah, well, I guess I'll go with what ifs from that. But we talked about the 20-mile march as a company, right? Where that's a Jim Collins thing again.
We haven't talked about it much, but we did. No, you and I have talked about it plenty, but how many times have we talked about it to the company?
That's fair. Yeah. So maybe it's more on this podcast. The company better be listening.
Asterisk.
So the 20-mile march, Jim Collins' concept of like, let's do 5% profit every year or whatever. We haven't done something like that for each of these positions. So to your value statements, right? Where it's like, hey, should there be a 20-mile march of a paid media person or account manager or whatever, right? Where it's like, hey, look, guys, we're at 5% better every year. So it's the whole like boiling frog in a way. But in some ways, I could see that unmotivate some people, demotivate them, and maybe they turn off, like those people that maybe are already at their like at the wire, I guess. But in other ways, it would also help set the expectation and say like, hey, this job's not going to be the same. I mean, you said it 100 times when you do like the 2050 experiment with our people, right? It's like, will this be the same in 10 years? No, right? Or 20 years? No. So anyways, should it be it's a thought experiment for me, but I don't know. How does that strike you doing something like a 20-mile march for each of the positions?
I love the idea of it. At a position level, I love the idea of it. So you definitely have the wheels turning. I think what I would need to feel if I were on the other side of that and hearing that now there's a 20-mile march as far as my capacity, for the next 5 years, we won't say like for 2 decades or something, is how much agency do I have over that? Not necessarily the wherever we land, whatever the 20 miles actually translates to, but the autonomy to get there, versus you're expecting me to fulfill this 20-mile march or, adhere to this. And it's with the same systems, the same kind of processes, et cetera, et cetera. That could, for me, be deflating or frustrating. But what we don't want to do, and I know you're more outspoken than I am about this, is that automation will do this for you, or AI or whatever you want to call it. And so I think that I would need to know that I'm empowered, in how I get there, that I have, again, a certain amount of agency over that. And I'd also want to know that, the company is doing things to help support me along the way. Because it's no different than saying, hey, you need to back to the 4-minute mile or whatever, or 40. It's like, you need to get to, 4.6. Right now you're running at a 5. We're not going to help you though, like as far as your diet, your strength training. And you also don't have the authority or autonomy to decide how you're going to train or whatever. Then I'd be like, this is super deflating. All you're doing is putting a higher number on me. So I would want to know that I have the empowerment as well as some support from the company. Then I could get on board with it.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a lot like we'd have to start this in the recruitment process, where it would be similar to how, like, when I talk to new folks, they always ask me like, what's the most important? I'm often asked when someone's interviewing, what's the most important thing for me to know? And I talk to them a lot about flexibility and their craft and that kind of thing. But we'd have to start that like, more, I guess, deliberately through the process to say, hey, just, all of us are you got to be a growth mindset person to work here. And how that translates is we actually expect 5% more out of this position every year. So in the interview process, they're like, okay, great. I understand. I'm supposed to get better every year, right? That doesn't sound bad, 5%. It's the folks that have been here for some time and they've already felt this, like the heat being turned up on them. It's like, hey, aren't you better? I used to talk to Victor about this when he was on the engineering team. We'd say like, don't you think you're gonna be better 10 years from now? And so we'd have to start communicating that so they understand it's not, meaning they can, I guess, conceptualize like, oh yeah, no, I am better now than I was a year ago. So of course I could be better then, versus feeling as if like it's always getting moved on them and it's unfair. You know,
That's a great point. That's a fantastic point. We don't, I think, at least for me and probably for you, I very much talk about growth mindset, but I don't connect it or translate it to job expectations.
right? Outcomes. And stuff, yeah.
Exactly. It's more like, hey, we're big believers in this self-development. We try to do our best to make sure we are educating and knowledge sharing and all that stuff, so that when you come out of Digible, you know, it's that when that day happens, I guess, if and when, that you feel like you bring a lot more value to the market, you know, for you yourself.
Yeah.
But not, stopping short of saying over the next 5 years, we expect.
Yeah. And what would be helpful with that is there's a lot of employees that I've spoken to in coffees and stuff over the years where they're like, I used to be handling 100,000 revenue. Now I'm handling 120. I deserve a raise. And it's like, yes, but my expectation is you've been here 3 years. So like, you should be better. Right. So like, you've outpaced it slightly or whatever. Right. Yeah. Versus like, I'm blowing it up. So that would just be healthy, I guess, for us all to get oriented around. And not saying that there aren't high achievers that haven't earned more. There certainly are. But the hard part is when oftentimes they're looking back 3, 4, 5 years ago at what Digible was, and they're not counting for all the investments we've made since, or like how we've changed their job or whatever. They've got coordinators now, right? And so it's like, so of course you're handling more. That's the whole point. And so just somehow, I guess, being, as you were saying with the value statements, showing how that morphs over time, and us, even the managers, being really familiar with it. So when someone hits you with it, you can say like, yes, but remember we did this thing, therefore this was our intended outcome. Because we have been hit with that some, or I have in coffees where people are like, now I'm handling this, so why don't I get more? It's like, yeah, but remember we made all these investments for you. So like, that was the intended outcome.
Well, also you're not a sales rep.
Right.
I mean, so eyes wide open, you know, coming into this position, you know, whether for me, it's like, it's a 32-hour work week, or at least that's
directionally
for the most part. But so whether you're handling 50,000 or 150,000 shouldn't matter. It's like, what matters is that you, put in a full work week, bring as much value as you can with the time that you're there. And that's how you're compensated. What I am now opening the door, and maybe, I'll regret this, but to a more value-based compensation plan. So just starting to go down this path with Ashley. She's intrigued, excited about it. You know, our employee experience / HR director is intrigued and mostly excited about it. But I think this brings us back to that conversation we had, in the first year, where we were kind of debating between each other about, if I can get the job done in 2 days versus 5 days before we had the 4-day work week, what does it matter to you?
Yeah.
You know, and I still stand by, you know, I expect you to work 5 days. And so, but I would say more shame on me if I miss the mark as far as expectations, so that I've set the bar so low that somebody can come in and deliver on that outcome in 2 days instead of 5. So I think, you know, as an employer, that is your responsibility. It's like, my expectations shouldn't allow for that, but maybe there will be some scenarios in which certainly that could happen. Then the question is do you calibrate, you know,
right.
And do you calibrate at the seat level? And so I often will throw my sports examples back at you to see how you respond or think about them. But, you know, if you have LeBron James and you bring him in as the best player in the world, and you put expectations on him based on the average of like that position or the all-stars. And guess what? He delivers it, but he's not really like putting in his full effort on the court during practice or whatever. It's like, I don't need to, because I can get to the expectation. Shame on you. To me, it's like, so we just brought in the best player in the world, but we've set expectations so low that he doesn't even have to put in the full effort to get there. But the problem with that I am totally granting that I don't know how to solve for yet is, what does it mean? How would the team feel, and more specifically our company, if a person at the same kind of same general responsibility, right? Like, let's just use a paid media strategist. That one of them was expected, to handle 500,000 a month, and the other one was only expected to handle 50.
Right.
But if the compensation supported that, then wouldn't it make it okay? It's like, what I'm trying to get to is more LeBron James. And I know that that's the best player in the world, but I want more of that. So therefore, instead of having those huge deltas, I'm going to get closer to the 500,000 a month or that level. But I'm still going to compensate based on the actual value you bring to the business.
Yeah.
But then you'd have, last thing to wrap this up, you could potentially have 125 different kind of compensation, not bands, but plans. If you're doing it that individualized.
Yeah, it's interesting because you want outcome plus someone's max effort, right?
Right, exactly.
And that's where I think it's a good thought exercise, because what if they don't care about the money? What if they are like, I could do this in 2 days, and I'd rather have the freedom versus like, they don't want to work for like a McKinsey or whatever, right? That's it. Or I don't know if you saw the I think it was Bank of America, but one of those big banks just put out a statement saying you're not allowed to work junior associates over 80 hours now. There's a lot of controversy about that, because they're like, people are like, well, look, those junior associates know that they're here, like to pay their dues. It's kind of like a law firm or whatever, in order to get the big bucks someday. But those junior associates started complaining about what they signed up for. Basically, it's like they knew going in what the workload was going to be like, and they started complaining about the workload. So now it's like you can't. And so there's a lot of controversy where it's like, well, then don't go work in a different industry. Go be a teacher or something. But you want the big bucks, so you are trading basically your 20s or whatever for those big bucks.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think in this instance, what's interesting is like what are the unintended consequences of like assuming that someone just wants to pay, and in this case being variable, and how much would LeBron like hanging out with the high school team, for example, right? If that's how big the delta is, and their skill set. And I told Nicole this, but I was like, one of the things I'm really struggling with as a parent is my first principle, where I really care about for Griff, I care about his effort in something. Theoretically, this is what I think. But when he gets into the real world, they're going to care more about outcome than they're going to care about effort, right? And so I just told her, I'm like, I'm struggling of how to merge these two, because I don't want to reward him for phoning it in on the baseball team or whatever, right? Even if he's winning, it's like I want to see his effort out there, but he's going to have to transition into outcome at some point in life, because in business, eventually that's where it'll lead, right? It's like they just care about your results; they don't really care how hard you tried, buddy. So I'm just struggling with that, and this to me feels very reminiscent of that conversation, because I hear you. I would love the energy to be around these high performers, high growth mindset people, like, as I understand LeBron to be. He's both highly talented and a highly growth mindset. So then to me, that just means like our expectations are higher, right? Versus what we were talking about on the other end of the spectrum. But if we're setting the bar at some point, there's going to be those outliers, right?
It's almost impossible to avoid some of those outliers. I love your small detour there about parenting. I kind of want to come back to that, but somewhat wrapping it up on the employer side of things. As founders and owners of the business, like, I want to know that I am bringing in people that are giving me their full effort, as you mentioned, Griffin, for the 4 days that they're here. Because, and part of it, I feel more conviction about that because we did give up a day, and if we gave up 2, I would feel even stronger. So the more that, we're trying to, bring balance, to our employees, the more I feel stubborn about, hey, I need you to give me all you got, with the time that you're here.
Yeah, it's almost like back to that conversation I was role playing about, like when you're recruiting someone and you're saying growth mindset, whatever, it's like, hey, we expect full effort out of you for these 4 days. Our commitment to you is that we are going to be raising the bar on everybody across the board. So your job's expected to handle 100 accounts now, but it'll be 110 next year, whatever. That's our 20-mile march. There are going to be teammates that can't keep up. And we want you to be working on other high caliber people, LeBron. So those people won't be here next year. So that's our commitment to you. So that don't, it may feel right now, if LeBron comes in and he's already handling 130, that you are running circles around the rest of the team. But my commitment is that I'm upskilling the rest of the team. And this is why you want to be here for the journey, because in 2 years, blah, 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 or something. Because if I was that player, I would, that's when I would get excited if I was like, oh, great, you're rebuilding the team around me or whatever, right? Totally. Or whatever. You're rebuilding the team so that because and so it's like, sure, LeBron, if you went somewhere else, they might expect those 70 hours out of you this week. I'm only expecting your damnedest for 32. Outside of the 32, you should be able to find as much balance as you want. But otherwise, you can go work at Bank of America or whatever, that's 80 hours a week, and knock yourself out. Yeah. Which to me, that would have helped a little bit. Like when I was at Verizon and when I had moved into the support role at Verizon, I truly could get myself done in probably like a day and a half. But I was just waiting around a lot of time for like paperwork to hit my desk. And so it did feel like I'm watching the clock, because I'm like, I finished my stuff for the day and maybe I'll get something tossed over the transom at like 4 p.m. And it's like, that'll take me 10 minutes. It's like, but otherwise, like, I don't need to get it done tomorrow. If I could just let this stuff stack up, I could get it all done a day and a half next week. So that was pretty rough. And I could imagine the LeBron feeling that. I did want to take another or add a little bit to this. It was interesting. We haven't done this podcast yet, but I was just telling you offline about the Whole Foods book I'm reading on the story of Whole Foods, called The Whole Story. And I thought it was super interesting because they did a lot of their growth through acquisition. And what he would do is when he would like make them an offer, he would get their financials and he'd look at their back office. I forget the exact term he called it, but he said that many of the other companies he was buying had anywhere from 6 to 10% back office percentage of revenue. And Whole Foods is at 2% back office percentage of revenue. So they were just way leaner on basically those support roles, corporate roles, that type of thing. And many of the competitors had just gone way too heavy, I guess, in his opinion.
They're missing value statements.
Exactly. And so he would be like, well, look, I can't buy this company. He wasn't willing to buy a company and take it from 10% to 2%. He thought that the impact on culture was too great. And so he would say, we might land somewhere around 4 or 5% maybe. But it was interesting because back to the value statements, I told you offline that he was talking about the produce people. And on one of he was doing this acquisition where he wanted to buy this one company specifically because their produce was so amazing, he couldn't figure it out. And this would be like, I think about the early 90s. And one of these companies he was buying, they were going through it. And he's like, his executive team was like, yeah, cut those produce roles. And he was like, well, hang on. That's why I like this company. I love their produce. So, be kind to the produce and leave it. And they're like, yeah, but
that's what everybody else.
Yeah. And then they were like, well, okay, but John, just so you know, they have this flower coordinator. He's like, there's a coordinator for they have 4 stores and there's a whole position for that. Yeah, you can kill that. And they kill the flower coordinator position. And the guy that he had wanted to buy the company for, the produce guy's like, see ya, dude. Like, I needed my flower coordinator. I'm the hell out of here. And so he lost the guy that one of the reasons he wanted to buy the company. And he said in the book, he's like, I kind of learned how important flower coordination was after that, because they hadn't put flowers in their stores before. So he just thought it was like an unneeded thing, but it was like part of the magic apparently of these stores. And later he said he learned how important flower coordination was, and now they have that role. And but to your point, like, it's not these other companies had evolved in a way that was just like, sure, yeah, we need a flower coordinator, but they weren't specific about the why. So then when the new owner comes in, they're like, well, we sure as hell don't need that role.
Yeah, what'd you expect? It's going to get cut.
Yeah. So I thought that was super fascinating, and why it's important to have, the value statements in this case, and the job description, and the why behind each of these things. But this is the last thing I want to touch on. Reverse value statements. So I don't know if this has already been obvious to you, but if you're asking for each of these new roles value statements, I'd be curious to do the exercise of like, so what happens if we remove that position or we remove that role? Like, it's almost like, what is the impact now? Like, what back to like how we haven't always done this. Yeah, it's kind of like the Elon Musk thing of like, why do we need the caps on the batteries? It's just
Yeah, and I think we actually have done a little bit of that, and we probably need to do more of that. But that can definitely feel, yeah, I mean, I'll just say gross, and for lack of a better word, and can destroy a culture, especially, given that we are the founders, we started the business, for us to wake up one day and do reverse value statements, zero-based budgeting, if you will, by role, and then 20% of the company. And I don't know what it would look like. I hope it's not 20%. But there were definitely some roles that we have eliminated, recognizing that they weren't bringing value to the company. And I think that's the nature of running a growing and responsibly growing business, is you have to know that you're going to do more of that, because you're not always going to be right. You just have to acknowledge that some of those bets aren't going to pay off, and it is going to result in somebody losing their job.
Well, I think part of where I wanted to play this out to was because I hear you. I think that would be big. That's almost, I think, where I'm guessing a lot of reworks come from, is if you really say, what does the client care about at the end of the day? And then you reversed, okay, what roles do we need to get that outcome that the clients care about? Then I think positions would look very different versus this is what we've always done, and we've always serviced X, Y, and Z to this customer, but that customer doesn't care. They just wanted this one thing, and there's 14 things we're providing them. And so that means we're doing 14 times the amount of things we need to be doing, right? In that instance. And so, I think there's something to that where it's almost like the battery caps, sticking on the Tesla vehicles. It's like, maybe we don't need those battery caps anymore. We didn't realize it. Right. We thought we did, but we've been so successful anyways that we had never come back to revisit the caps.
I think it's easier to do that exercise, which I love that anecdote from Musk, even though I'm not, as you know, a huge fan of his. But in manufacturing, than it is like kind of in a, I don't want to say service business, because I might not be making the right distinction here. But when you think about what's important to our customer, we all know the experience, and a lot contributes to that experience. So is it really, I guess, feasible or practical to try to deconstruct all the different things that contribute to that experience and then see if we could pull that out? I'm not saying it's impossible, and I actually like the idea of it. Again, I think it's such a powerful exercise to do with all sorts of different pockets of your company or elements of your company, but far easier with the battery caps than to say, what if we didn't have that? And you might be able to help me more than I can help myself here. Because I feel like maybe I'm going too far if I say the mid-monthly calls, but that is a question for me. And we know that there's plenty of examples of them getting ghosted. And then I could come to the conclusion, no different than the flower coordinator, saying we don't need mid-monthly calls. But then it dilutes on some level the experience. And it's harder, just see that as clearly, but then you start to see retention or your referral engine slows down because the experience has been compromised, but at a fractional level. So I'm just wondering if you agree or disagree, but can you, if the customers, what's most important to them is that they have a great experience, and let's be specific with Digible, and then you were to try and go Musk on that experience, do you think that would be more difficult than the manufacturing example?
No, I think I don't, because I see it as an assembly line anyways. I see a lot of the way we service clients as the assembly line. Like, okay, great. It's like mid-month check-in is basically like QA on the assembly line. And so I think of it almost like, what's the minimum viable product we have to deliver to a client for them to stay? And if you were to, let's just make it easy and say there's 2 calls a month. So if you remove the mid-month call, can you handle twice the customers? Are we going to lose half of our customers because of removing that? I don't think so. So it's almost like a rate change, right? Where a profit well will say you can raise rate by 20% pretty easily. You're not going to lose 20% of your customers. Even if you lose 10%, it's a major net gain. And so, I see it very similarly. And I think I'll give an example here back, remembering my Verizon days when I'm doing office stuff. But the average account I had would have something like, I remember the number 12, like 12 documents per ad. And these would get uploaded digitally to Salesforce, and the rep would do that. And then I'd have to go in and QA these 12 documents per ad. Now the reps were not naming these documents in the naming convention that we wanted. And so my job was supposed to be either kill it, like meaning send it back and say, rename these 12 documents, rep, or I rename them myself, or I could just not do what they wanted me to do and I could just send them along. And guess what I would do? I would just send them along. Because what was the value in renaming these documents? There was no explained value. And I met the COO on 3 occasions. And I had said, what is the point of this process? Because for me at the time, internet was not fast. This was very time consuming to download, upload. Salesforce is not a good document repository. And so it would take my time from QA an account from like 10 minutes to like 45 minutes to do this process. I'm like, this does not seem worth it. Because I didn't see the impact of that. There are other ways that you find this file, find the ad, whatever. So my point being is I think there's probably some of these document renaming processes that we probably do that the client there's no benefit to them. There's frankly no real benefit to us either. And you can just remove that battery cap from the installation process. And like I said, I got it done in a third of the time. Then if I had just taken this, I tripled my time if I started naming these documents.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Because I'm now similar to the compensation and at the individual level and kind of the agency. And I'm going to go all the way to I think it was out of the book Drive that talked about the row environment, the results only work environment.
Yeah.
Of mid-month calls or no mid-month calls. Do we set a kind of a policy or guideline or principle, or do we abandon those? And it's like, it's your decision, because that the end goal here is to have a happy customer that ultimately refers out business and does all the behaviors, right? All the things that we would look for from a customer. And so, yeah, it's all optional. Everything is.
Everything would be nerve-wracking to me because it's back to like the reputational damage and all that other stuff. But I do wonder if there's, it's almost like you have these SLAs. You must meet it's like your whole like, can they determine how they get there? The agency, like they have agency to get here with certain pit stops along the way. You must go from New York to California, stopping in Kansas City. But outside of that, like we expect you to be there in 3 days. Mm-hmm. If it takes you 4 days, it's too long. If you get here in 2 days, that's cool too. But did you make it to Kansas City? Right? Like maybe we're cool with that. So I think there's something of that just for different standards of excellence. Because one thing that's hard is let's say we did have a sales team and they couldn't tell you what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, you might get a mid-month call if they feel like it, but you might not, Well,
you'd be pitching customization, instead of pitching like mid-month calls or SLAs.
So the rate is customized too.
No, I would probably not. I would offer. That's where I would have some. I was about to say, like, if we went to that row environment, there has to be some level of controls, some level of governance, but as little as possible, so that you're really leaning into, again, the whole autonomy thing, which is from the book. And I think that company in Brazil has had one of the most successful financial track records over the last decade globally, or 2 decades. So, there's probably 10 other examples of that being a train wreck, but that it can be done, it can be successful. But I was just going to say, as the sales rep, I would say, we're highly focused on your satisfaction. And we know that probably has these 3 or 4 kind of key drivers, right? As far as performance, the experience itself, communication, strategy, whatever. And so we're going to work together on optimizing, those key points. And how's that sound to you? No, it sounds great, Mm-hmm. So don't worry about whether we have a mid-month call or not. I'm trying to make sure that, the experience you have with us is the one that you really want, in order to be successful. Yeah. But then it's like, well, how the hell do you scale a business like that? Because that's where it all breaks down. It's like, yeah, maybe that works for your first 10 clients, but what about when you have 1,000 clients?
You did bring one other thing, a point I'd wanted to make earlier. When we were in the beginning, it was kind of Whole Foods talked about this, where he was like, everybody did everything. There were no departments. It was like everyone knew how to like handle the produce, how to handle the box goods, whatever. And then it was like, I think there were like 4 stores, and he was like, and he thought he cracked the code. He said, like, his team actually, they were like, let's write a business book on this. And they designed departments. And their departments were like, great, we now break up into teams and there's a team lead. And he was like, thank God I didn't write a business book on it, because it's like a rediscover the wheel. You know, it's like, and he's like, and his point was, he was like, you know, sometimes you just have to rediscover the wheel on your own for you to understand how important it is, and how much you should respect it or whatever. So I thought that was a good point. But yeah, that whole like breaking into, since everybody could do everything, I feel like that's what's happening. In some ways, it's like, as we've seen, you get more specialized positions, the bigger you get, the more scale you have. But then it's like, well, we didn't have an HR department before. So then you get like, you start with like more generalized positions. And then as you get bigger, it's like they get more specialized positions. So I think to me, it's interesting to think about the company it's almost like you with the pharma grade stuff, where it's like, well, this department has been here since day one. Therefore, it's like, it's pretty clear what it needs. And we shouldn't be getting a lot of like new ideas, new positions, support roles being thrown in. This other department, we should expect a lot of change to be happening over time, because we're starting with these support roles that are eventually going to turn into specialized positions. And that means there's going to be more turmoil, I guess, with that part of the staff versus, you know, seeing everything. And I have often viewed our company as not in those different maturities, where I'm like, hey, look, it seems like all these specialty roles are getting made in this new department or whatever. Like they're asking for these new things that didn't exist before. It's like, sure, but in a way, of course, because it is a newer department. It's 2 years old, you know, whatever, versus 7 years old. So then it's more about the communication, I guess, is through the staff. That way, because we're so transparent with everybody, they see when new roles go up, and then oftentimes they'll be like, well, that department's getting a new role that didn't exist before, so then why don't we get one that didn't exist? And it's like, yeah, because it's in a different maturity state.
Totally. Or they were more effective in putting together their value statements.
And great at business plans. Go help you manage it.
Totally. Well, I want to end on, I think, a relatively simple question. And I'm going to stop short of what I was about to say and just let you answer it. But principally speaking, do you believe that a business should become more efficient or less efficient as it scales?
Principally, for the bottom line, it should get more efficient. That's what I believe. That's not what I've experienced, though. Not just here, but with other companies I look at too. And I think there's probably a little bit of like a U curve to that.
Define efficiency.
Well, yeah, more like profit per employee or profit per dollar or whatever.
Yeah.
That's like the scorecard for everybody.
Yeah. Well, some people might say you're more efficient in doing the work, but not. I know that may sound silly, but it doesn't translate, because that's where I think you can get tripped up. Is we might think, man, we've become way more efficient at serving campaigns, but then if you're not capturing all those, I guess, adjacent roles or things that are driving like dues and subs, you know, the whole picture, and only spotlight the labor efficiency, you may be overlooking some things that are really critical to evaluating that picture. I agree. I was looking for you to validate what you just did, that you believe the same is true. And yet it does seem, and I don't think we're unique, but that many companies find themselves less efficient as they scale. And I think a lot of it, I'm not going to say all of it, ties to what I was just, where we started this conversation, as far as payroll being one of the bigger factors. But I'm wondering what other factors might be contributing to that. I have my theories, and maybe we pick this up or maybe we don't. We could hit it offline. But what else are the common kind of culprits to a business that is scaling, becoming less efficient as it relates to the profitability?
Yeah, we don't have to go super far, but one thing that I've also come to think is I'd hate to have like another adjusted EBITDA, but there's like all of the volunteer work and things like that you do. So, and creature comforts. Like when we first started, you'll remember the first real office address we had, we didn't have heating or air conditioning. It's like, guess what, guys? We now have heating and air conditioning. You should be happy to legit. But we sure as hell also didn't volunteer. right? And we did provide lunch, I guess, but yeah, there were a lot of those other things that like over time, it's like, well, basic work conditions, we should have heating and air conditioning, right? And then over time, it's like, oh, we want to also give back. But if you pulled out the non-essentials, like the give back stuff, it does remove from culture in some ways, and in some ways inflate happiness, but it would definitely have back to the bottom line. So it's just easy to pick on the volunteer stuff, but there's more of that style stuff that if you were zero-based budgeting, you wouldn't say is necessary. And then that's where I think you need to, as a leadership team, like the owner, whoever needs to decide what kind of company do they want. Like,
exactly.
I want a company that has coffee cups, right? And that does volunteer work.
Totally. I think the best way to evaluate whether you're becoming more or less efficient is not your profitability, but it is spotlighting, a specific role, and seeing how that's changed. If you can attach it, or connect it, ultimately profitability, great. But often, there's too many other things that are blurring that picture. You also have to normalize it. So for us, if we were to just look at paid media strategists and say, okay, in 2019, what did that look like? And then look now. Of course, it's a good picture for us, but why are we seeming to plateau? Part of it, you have to look on the hood and say, okay, they were handling, as you like to say, 3 SKUs or 4 SKUs when we were in 2019. Now they're handling 12, have the expectations of our clients changed in any way and are there more systems or less systems? But my bigger point is I think a lot of times companies, in fact, are either as efficient or more efficient. But because of all the other things that you're adding as a company grows, if you do just try to simplify it and look at your profitability based on like FTE, that's not really the most accurate picture, at least at a role level. I mean, you could say, but just think about it. We had to bring on an experienced /HR department. You cannot get to 120 people and have no HR. Maybe some could, but I don't think it's a good idea. But if I just looked at profitability, that's going against profitability. And then I'm thinking the company has somehow become less efficient because I'm zeroing in on one metric. So I think you do. My main point here is you just really need to look at the role itself to determine whether you're moving the needle or not.
I think that I like it, but I also think it's almost like, what is the company's most important number? And and that's where I was going at the scorecard of profit. And so that's why I'm saying if that's the company's most important number, okay, great. Now I think it's okay to have these like benchmarks where it's like it's almost like on an expense account. Like, don't seek approval for anything under $500, right? Just do what's best for the company, right? Whereas Netflix did $10 million, right? So I think there's a certain threshold there where it's like, hey, we need to maintain X amount of profit per employee. Outside of if we get below that, we're gonna have a lot of questions. But above that, we've already given quite a bit of like fresh or leeway or whatever for each department that we're not gonna talk about the coffee cups, right? And so back to like the owner needs to decide what do they want. So they want to do some volunteer work, they want to do X, Y, and Z, but then they want to maintain a certain 20-mile march right along the way. So I hear you on the role thing. I think it's a good point to see how that's evolved, but there becomes a lot of the whole, like, I was thinking this when you were saying, look back in 6 months or 12 months to see how if a role is successful. As we've seen, it's never a perfect experiment, right? So there's always going to be an excuse for something. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was defaulting back to EBITDA.
Yeah, which is what most business owners do. It's like. Yeah, it's exhausting, frankly, to unpack all of that, but just because it's exhausting doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So
yeah, you just have to decide back to like you and I've talked about, what are you proud of?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, hey, as long as it's here, I don't need to eke out the last coffee cup.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hope you guys found this thing on value statements interesting. Not Courtney, and actually, we'll see how you guys do on that value statement test.
Totally.
Going forward, but anyways, this is fun. It's good to try to shake it out.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys next time.